He brushes his teeth beside her, same mirror, same rhythm, same silence. Their reflection looks synchronized, practiced, almost peaceful. But behind his stillness lives decay, the quiet kind that doesn't scream, only sinks. He believes he's steady, dependable, the kind of man who keeps everything from falling apart. Yet what he's really kept intact is the illusion of himself. The mirror doesn't show the cost, only the absence. Marriage didn't strip his freedom, it anesthetized it, until he mistook numbness for peace. It begins innocently, a story every man has heard since childhood. Find a good woman, build a life, stay loyal, provide, protect. The promise is simple. If you do everything right, you'll have peace. For most men, marriage isn't just a choice, it's proof of manhood. The ring becomes the medal. The vows a quiet declaration that he has fulfilled his purpose. He believes he's entering a partnership, but what he's really entering is an institution built on unspoken exchanges. Devotion traded for belonging, freedom exchanged for structure, ambition softened into stability. At first, it feels like elevation. He works harder, speaks softer, molds himself into the version of a man who deserves permanence. She sees his effort and meets it with warmth, and together, they build the life both were told to want. A home, shared laughter, a sense of direction that feels safe. But safety and meaning are not the same thing. He doesn't realize that every compromise he calls maturity is also a quiet extraction of self. Each time he silences an impulse to keep the peace, a part of him forgets how to want. Each time he yields, he tells himself it's love, unaware that love measured by sacrifice eventually breeds resentment. Nobody warns him about this. Society celebrates his surrender. She tamed him, they say, as though taming were an achievement rather than a slow spiritual death. His family praises his calmness, his reliability, his ability to endure. Yet the longer he endures, the less alive he feels. He begins to confuse emotional suppression with emotional intelligence, duty with devotion. The world applauds his selflessness while his inner voice grows quiet enough to disappear. He notices it in small ways, in how he filters his words before speaking, how he measures his joy against her approval, how he moves through his own house like a polite guest. It's not unhappiness, it's emptiness wearing the mask of contentment. And because nothing is visibly wrong, he convinces himself it's just adulthood. This is what being a man means, he thinks. Steady, controlled, undemanding. But beneath that control lies a hunger for something he can no longer name. The myth of marriage is not that it fails men. It's that it convinces them the erosion of self is noble. They call it growing up, settling down, maturing. But real maturity is not the death of vitality. It's the mastery of it. What most men call love is often quiet self-abandonment wrapped in virtue, and by the time he realizes it, the story he built his identity on has already consumed him. Marriage doesn't collapse because of betrayal or neglect. It decays through the invisible math of emotional exchange. Every relationship runs on an economy, a constant negotiation of value. What's given, what's withheld, what's silently expected in return. Most men enter marriage believing they're investing in love, but what they're really doing is entering a system of unspoken debts. Each gesture, each concession, each long night of listening and fixing and absorbing, it all becomes a kind of currency. The problem is that men rarely notice the cost until they're bankrupt. From the beginning, he's conditioned to give. The culture tells him that love is proven through sacrifice, that devotion must be demonstrated through consistency, that good men endure without complaint. He builds his worth around service, the husband who provides, the father who never falters, the man who never lets his family see him break. It sounds admirable, even heroic. But beneath that heroism lies an ancient wiring, the belief that a man's value comes only from what he can offer, never from who he is. That belief is the root of the imbalance, a psychological contract where he earns love and she receives it as a condition of his effort. In the early years, this imbalance hides behind romance. She admires his drive, his dependability, the way he shoulders the weight. He feels needed, respected, essential. The dopamine rush of purpose keeps him moving. But over time, routine replaces novelty, and the reward system that once reinforced his giving starts to falter. What was once gratitude becomes expectation. The same gestures that once inspired affection now barely register. He works harder to restore the feeling, unaware that effort is the very thing eroding his sense of worth. There's a biological undertone to this shift. A man's reward circuitry is built around accomplishment, the surge of dopamine that follows a challenge conquered or a risk survived. But long-term domestic stability blunts that feedback loop. There's no finish line, no defining victory. Every day becomes a repetition of duty without climax, effort without reward. Slowly, his internal chemistry learns to associate marriage not with passion or vitality, but with depletion. He's no longer chasing excitement, he's chasing relief from arguments, from disconnection, from the quiet heaviness of unacknowledged effort. He begins to live like an accountant of emotions. Every smile becomes reassurance that his investment still holds value. Every sigh or cold glance feels like inflation, proof that his worth is slipping. Without realizing it, he internalizes a brutal rule. Peace must be purchased. He gives more time, more energy, more self-suppression, believing that harmony is something he can earn if he just performs better. But performance has no endpoint. It only deepens the sense that his existence is conditional, that love depends on his utility. Over time, this creates a subtle hierarchy. She becomes the emotional authority. He becomes the regulator of her state. When she's anxious, he calms her. When she's angry, he absorbs it. When she's distant, he blames himself. His own emotional reality shrinks until it exists only in reaction to hers. What looks like stability from the outside is actually emotional servitude. A man whose identity has been reduced to management, and because society rewards this role, he defends it. He tells himself he's strong because he endures. He calls it leadership, but it's exhaustion disguised as purpose. The quiet truth is that he's addicted to validation. Her approval functions like a drug, unpredictable, fleeting, impossible to stockpile. One kind word resets his nervous system, one withdrawn glance shatters it. This is the hidden dependency no man wants to admit, the way his sense of peace lives inside someone else's mood. Eventually, the system collapses under its own imbalance. She starts to feel something she can't explain, a dull lack of attraction. He feels it too and mistakes it for ingratitude. But attraction isn't about appreciation, it's about polarity. The more he gives up his boundaries to preserve peace, the less masculine charge he carries. What once felt like devotion now feels like compliance. She respects his kindness but no longer feels his strength. He still loves her, but in a way that drains rather than animates him. This is the hidden cost. Not financial, not even emotional, but existential. The man who once gave everything to feel loved now exists only as a function of his giving. He's the reliable system she depends on but no longer desires, the emotional architecture of a home that no longer feels alive, and he doesn't know how to stop because stopping feels like selfishness, and selfishness is the one sin he's never learned to forgive himself for. The cruel irony is that the very traits that make him dependable, patience, loyalty, adaptability, are the same ones that make him disposable in a psychological economy that rewards intensity over steadiness. In the end, he doesn't break from lack of love. He breaks from the imbalance of it, from years of trading authenticity for approval, until he can no longer tell which one he ever truly wanted. Every marriage runs on a contract no one remembers signing. It's not written in vows or spoken in fights. It's made of habits, tiny negotiations that turn into rules. The man learns early what earns peace and what provokes tension. She learns what forms of silence he accepts. Slowly, they stop communicating through truth and start communicating through compliance. The loop begins the moment he decides that keeping her calm is more important than keeping himself honest. In the first years, it feels harmless. He says yes more often, lets small things go, softens his edges. He calls it empathy, calls it partnership. But every no he swallows rewires something fundamental. His relationship with discomfort. Discomfort becomes danger. Authenticity becomes risk. What was once a shared bond becomes a silent management system where he's the operator and she's the gauge. When she's happy, he feels safe. When she's distant, he feels defective. His self-worth becomes a thermostat, calibrated to her emotional climate. He starts to anticipate everything, her moods, her tone, her timing. He learns to preempt tension before it begins, not out of fear of her, but fear of losing stability. What he doesn't see is that stability without polarity is stagnation. A man who stops confronting becomes a man who stops leading. He tells himself he's protecting the marriage, but he's really protecting his dependency on validation. Each compromise that maintains peace simultaneously erases one more trace of his individuality. The invisible contract deepens with predictability. She begins to know exactly what he'll do. If she withdraws, he will chase. If she criticizes, he will self-correct. If she tests, he will try harder. This predictability feels safe for a while, but safety without tension breeds contempt. The man she once respected for his direction now feels domesticated by his devotion. He's no longer her equal, he's her caretaker. What she experiences as comfort, he experiences as slow suffocation. And neither can articulate it without sounding ungrateful. Eventually the dynamic reverses. The man who once led now waits for permission, for affection, for proof that he's doing enough. He doesn't realize that his waiting is the very thing draining her attraction. She doesn't want to dominate him, but she can't surrender to someone who's already surrendered to her. His compliance becomes invisible, the background hum of a man who never disrupts, never surprises, never refuses. What started as love turns into quiet management, two people performing the motions of intimacy without its electricity. This loop repeats until it becomes identity. He's no longer a man with preferences, limits, or mystery. He's the reliable emotional infrastructure of someone else's comfort. The tragic part is that he calls it virtue. He believes he's evolved, matured beyond ego, when in truth he's become domesticated by approval. And once a man ties his masculinity to his usefulness, his spirit begins to starve. There's always a moment, subtle and devastating, when he notices the imbalance. Maybe she criticizes him for being too passive, or she stops seeking his opinion altogether. It sounds like frustration, but what she's really expressing is disappointment. Not in him, but in what's vanished. She's no longer arguing with her husband, she's arguing with his absence. The man who once led her heart now manages her comfort, and she resents him for giving her everything she thought she wanted. The loop sustains itself because both are complicit. She tests his boundaries to feel his strength, he dissolves them to prove his love. She withdraws to provoke polarity, he responds with accommodation. Each believes they're protecting the relationship, but what they're really protecting is control. Control over discomfort, control over uncertainty, control over the possibility of rejection. And in that control, they kill desire. No contract like this ends with a signature. It ends with disconnection. Two people sitting side by side, performing normalcy. He tells himself this is what long-term love looks like. Calm, stable, predictable. But calm without vitality is decay, and marriage without risk becomes a polite arrangement between strangers. Every man trapped in this loop faces the same choice. Continue earning love like wages, or remember that real love doesn't need to be bought. The invisible contract loses its power the moment he stops negotiating and starts existing again. Because what she wanted all along was not the man who never offends, but the one who stands firmly enough in himself to be felt. Every comfort demands payment. That is the first rule men forget. Marriage, like every human arrangement, runs on exchange. But men are rarely taught to count the cost. They measure commitment in years and gestures, not in the subtler currency of identity and freedom. The hidden cost of marriage isn't in what a man provides, it's in what he unconsciously trades to sustain the illusion that providing is enough. At first, the trades seem noble: freedom for peace, solitude for security, adventure for belonging. These look like wise exchanges, signs of growth. But growth without awareness is just drift. Over time, he stops noticing the scale he's been balancing. Every compromise, every self-edit, every withheld impulse quietly tipping the weight toward comfort. He tells himself this is what men do. They settle, they provide, they stay grounded. Yet grounded slowly becomes grounded down. The same house that gave him pride becomes a cage padded with routine. The rule of trade-offs is brutal because it's honest. Everything gained costs something of equal value. The problem isn't the giving, it's the blindness. When a man gives unconsciously, he becomes indebted. He doesn't know what he's paying for anymore, he just keeps paying. His time, his energy, his silence. The interest compounds in resentment. He wakes one day realizing he's purchased stability with the currency of self-respect. She feels this imbalance too, though she rarely names it. A woman can sense when a man's giving lacks choice. The energy shifts from offering to obligation. What once felt generous now feels heavy. She no longer feels gratitude because he's no longer giving. He's appeasing. The difference is invisible but unmistakable. Choice carries power. Compliance carries fatigue. And fatigue kills polarity faster than conflict ever could. The only way to escape this silent debt is awareness, conscious trade. A man who gives knowingly stays free because he's aware of the cost. He can say, "I choose this," and still remain whole. He understands that real partnership doesn't mean merging into one, but moving together as two complete forces. Love that costs him, everything is not devotion. It's dependency disguised as duty. Marriage demands sacrifice, yes, but sacrifice must be deliberate. To love without losing oneself requires boundaries as sacred as vows. Because the truth every man must face is simple. Peace is not free, security is not free, belonging is not free. The only question is whether you paid with intention or by neglect. The rule never changes. You either choose your sacrifices or they choose you. Collapse doesn't come as an explosion. It arrives quietly, like mold, spreading beneath the surface while everything still looks intact. The marriage appears calm, functional, even admirable. They smile at dinners, post photos, celebrate anniversaries, but inside the man has disappeared into the machinery of his own promises. The same traits that once made him dependable now make him invisible. His reliability has turned into absence. He feels it first as fatigue, not physical but existential, a weight that no amount of sleep can cure. He wakes next to the same woman, in the same bed, with the same sense of duty pressing against his ribs. Nothing is wrong, but nothing feels alive. He tries to fix it the way he's fixed everything, through effort. He plans dates, buys gifts, works harder. But effort is gasoline on a fire that's already out. It produces motion without warmth. She feels it too, though she can't articulate it. The man who once carried energy now carries silence. He's kind but distant, present but hollow. She tells him she misses how he used to be, but he doesn't remember who that was. He's been performing stability for so long that even his reflection feels foreign. Every conversation becomes translation. Her words filtered through his exhaustion, his answers filtered through fear of confrontation. Eventually something breaks. Sometimes it's a confession, sometimes a disappearance, sometimes just a dead stare across a dinner table that neither of them can interpret. The collapse isn't dramatic because drama requires energy, and both are too drained to fight. It's the quiet dissolution of two lives that stopped touching long ago. He calls it confusion. She calls it disconnection. But the truth is simpler. The man she fell in love with died the moment he started living for her comfort instead of his conviction. This is the final cost of unconscious marriage. The erosion of polarity, the suffocation of self-respect, the death of attraction replaced by the ritual of endurance. He thought he could preserve peace by avoiding truth, but peace without truth is paralysis, and paralysis eventually becomes rot. When the collapse comes, it's rarely repairable, because it isn't about betrayal or incompatibility, it's about depletion, years of invisible self-abandonment that no apology can reverse. You can't rebuild attraction on top of pity. You can't resurrect polarity from the corpse of compliance. What's gone isn't the marriage itself, it's the living energy that made it real. Every man faces this reckoning eventually. The choice is brutal but clear. Continue dying slowly in the name of loyalty, or confront the version of himself he buried beneath responsibility. Most don't make the confrontation. They settle into quiet decay, confusing endurance with virtue, mistaking the absence of conflict for the presence of love. But the few who do face it, who dare to look directly at what they traded away, become something different. Not colder, not crueler, but conscious. Collapse, when faced honestly, isn't destruction. It's exposure. It reveals the true exchange rate of the life he built. Every smile purchased with silence, every moment of calm bought with the erosion of self. And only through that exposure can a man begin to rebuild on truth instead of comfort. Reconstruction begins the moment a man stops seeking fairness and starts seeking truth. Fairness keeps him trapped in blame, measuring who gave more, who hurt more, who stopped trying first. Truth asks a harder question. What part of me did I surrender in the name of love? The answer is always the same. He lost himself not through cruelty or betrayal, but through slow, unexamined generosity. The kind that empties rather than enriches. To rebuild, he must first separate care from compliance. Care comes from strength, the ability to give without dissolving. Compliance comes from fear, the instinct to appease to avoid loss. The line between them is invisible until he tests it. He must relearn refusal, the sacred art of saying no without apology, not to punish her, but to re-establish gravity. Without resistance, love has no orbit. Without boundaries, attraction has no charge. This reconstruction isn't rebellion, it's reclamation. He stops performing calmness to keep peace and starts expressing truth even when it trembles. He begins to understand that masculinity isn't stoicism, it's composure under truth. He learns that silence isn't maturity when it hides resentment, and patience isn't virtue when it denies need. Every act of honesty, no matter how small, becomes a stone in the rebuilding of his internal structure. The second step is to reclaim polarity through purpose. Most men who lose themselves in marriage don't lack passion, they lack direction. Their energy, once aimed at conquest and creation, became trapped in maintenance. A man without purpose becomes emotionally heavy, not because he loves too much, but because he has nowhere to place his fire. He turns that heat inward until it burns his confidence down to ash. To rebuild, he must redirect it outward again, into work, mastery, challenge, something that demands his full capacity. A man moving towards something larger than domestic peace becomes magnetic again. His vitality returns not through escape, but through alignment. Reconstruction also demands solitude, not isolation, but space for recalibration. A man cannot hear his own voice while living in constant negotiation. He must learn to sit in silence that isn't shared, to occupy his own company without shame. That quiet is where dignity regenerates. It's where he remembers that self-respect is not arrogance. It's the immune system of the soul. Without it, every relationship becomes infection. She may resist this transformation. It disrupts the familiar script. The man who once folded now stands. The one who once chased now pauses. Her tests may intensify, not from malice, but from instinct, to see if his new composure is real or rehearsed. But if he holds steady, something profound shifts. Respect returns first, then attraction, then the rarest thing of all, peace without suppression. Reconstruction doesn't always save the marriage. Sometimes it exposes that what's broken shouldn't be rebuilt. But even that realization is sacred, because the goal isn't preservation, it's integrity. A man who rebuilds himself doesn't need the relationship to survive for the lesson to hold. The victory isn't in keeping the structure standing, it's in no longer living inside it as a ghost. Every truth reclaimed restores a fragment of his original force. Every boundary held becomes proof that love and strength were never opposites, only estranged allies. When he stops fearing loss, he becomes impossible to manipulate. When he stops performing virtue, he becomes authentic, and authenticity, even when it costs him everything, is the only state worth rebuilding from. Reconstruction doesn't give him back what he lost, it gives him back who he lost. And that man, grounded, self-defined, quietly unshakable, is the only foundation love can ever truly rest on. He stands before the same mirror again, the one where he used to disappear. The reflection hasn't changed much. Same face, same life, same room. But the silence inside him feels different now. It's not compliance anymore, it's clarity. He no longer mistakes peace for absence or love for self-erasure. He understands that the hidden cost of marriage was never about what she took. It was about what he kept giving after there was nothing left to trade. For years he thought devotion meant endurance. That strength was proven by how quietly he could absorb, how well he could carry. But strength without truth is servitude. Love without self is dependency. He knows this now, not as theory, but as scar tissue. Every sacrifice made without awareness became a small betrayal of self. and betrayal, repeated long enough, becomes identity. The reconstruction wasn't about winning her back or punishing her absence. It was about restoring symmetry, the kind that can exist only when both stand whole. He doesn't need her to understand the price he paid, he only needs to stop paying it. Peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of self within it. Marriage may not have destroyed him, it revealed what was already fragile. A man trying to earn worth through usefulness, trying to be loved through performance. Now he carries a quieter kind of strength, the kind that refuses to negotiate dignity for comfort or loyalty for validation. He still believes in love, but no longer as salvation. Love is not a shelter from the storm, it is the weather itself, and the man who survives it is the one who knows how to remain standing in the rain without losing his shape. The hidden cost of marriage was never peace. It was forgetting that peace was something he could build within himself all along.